You see, something's going to happen.
What? What's going to happen?
Something wonderful.
What?
I understand how you feel. You see, it's all very clear to me now.
Welcome to the Occult Rejects. In today's episode, we'll be discussing someone who is a figure where history and legend intertwine. A prince of the mighty Umayyad Caliphate who later became known as an alchemist and seeker of occult wisdom. In this episode, we discuss Khalid ibn Yazid, tracing his noble lineage, dramatic political struggles, and the enigmatic pursuits that earned him the title, the first Arab alchemist. In this episode, we will explore how this young Umayyad heir, once poised to rule an empire, instead became famous for mysticism, alchemy, and esoteric knowledge. From his upbringing amid the splendor and strife of a rising Islamic empire to the tales of secret teachings under a Christian hermit, Khalid's story is rich with human drama and supernatural appeal. I only pursue this art so that I may enrich my companions and brothers. I once craved the caliphate, and it was denied me. So I found solace only in attaining the ultimate knowledge of this craft, such that no one who's known me will ever need to stand at a ruler's door out of want or fear. The journey of Khalid is not just a historical chronicle, but a window into the occult heritage of early Islam. Why does he deserve a feature on the Occult Rejects? Because his life embodies the very crossroads of power and arcane knowledge. A royal alchemist who pursued that which is impossible in the eyes of contemporaries, yet inspired generations of later scientists, mystics, and artists. Today we will walk through Khalid's life, his princely youth during the Second Islamic Civil War, the heartbreak of losing a throne, his retreat into scholarly solitude, and the legacy of texts and legends that sprouted around his name. By the end, you'll understand how Khalid ibn Yazid's quest for wisdom left an imprint on occult lore, religious thought, and the scientific imagination, making his tale a perfect fit for exploration of the rejected and the arcane. Let us return to the exposition of the three words, in which the whole art consists. Khalid was born around 668 CE into the ruling family of the Umayyad Caliphate, a dynasty then consolidating its grip over the recently expanded Islamic world. His father was Caliph Yazid I, and his grandfather was Muawiyah I, founder of the Umayyad state. Thus, Khalid grew up in the elite circle of Damascus, the Umayyad capital, enjoying the privileges of a princely upbringing. We can imagine him as a child in the lavish courts of Syria, educated by tutors in Quranic studies, Arabic poetry, and perhaps even exposed to Greek or Syriac learning through local Christian scholars. His mother, Fakida, was herself from a prominent clan. This noble heritage imbued Khalid with a sense of destiny from an early age. The world Khalid was born into was one of dynamic change and cultural fusion. The Muslim Empire had exploded out of Arabia in the mid-7th century, conquering lands from Persia to Egypt. By Khalid's youth, the Umayyad Caliphate stretched across the Middle East and North Africa, ruling over diverse peoples and inheriting centers of ancient knowledge like Alexandria. The atmosphere in Syria was cultured. Arabic was the new official tongue, but Greek and Aramaic intellectual traditions still lingered in schools and monasteries. This environment likely influenced Khalid's later intellectual curiosity. Indeed, the conquest of Alexandria in 642 had put Muslims in contact with the bulk of Greek philosophy and science, including alchemy, planting seeds of scientific interest that Khalid would later nurture. One medieval Arab writer, Al-Jahiz, gives us a fascinating glimpse of Khalid's character as a young man. Khalid ibn Yazid was an orator, a poet, and was eloquent, comprehensive, of sound judgment, and extremely well-mannered. Such praise suggests he was not only of noble blood, but also carefully educated in rhetoric and literature, standing out among his peers for his intellect. Life in the Umayyad court also meant exposure to politics and warfare early on. Khalid spent his childhood and teens amid the turmoil of the Second Fitna, Islamic Civil War. When he was about 15, his father had died and power passed briefly to Khalid's elder half-brother, Morianis II, but within months, his brother also perished, plunging the caliphate into a succession crisis. Though very young, perhaps 16, Khalid suddenly found himself a potential candidate for the throne of an empire. Well, let's get into some of his education and influences first. Khalid's education unfolded inside a Umayyad court that drew on Arab adab, Quranic study, and the Syriac Greek learning of Greater Syria. Later, Arabic reportages remember him not merely as a prince but as a seeker who turned from politics toward the divine art. Those same sources pair him with Byzantine monk named Morianis or Morianis, a reclusive sage of Palestine or Syria. In this classic Arabic dossier, later translated into Latin as the Liber de Composition Alchemy, Morianis teaches Khalid in a sustained dialogue, framing the art as both a science of substance and a path of purification. Medieval writers even make Morianis a pupil as Stephanos of Alexandria, visually stitching Khalid into a late antique chain of transmission. It is through this very legend that Khalid's influences come into focus. Alexandrian Hermeticism and Neoplatonism, Syriac monastic craft lore, astrological cosmology, and the practical metallurgies of the Eastern Mediterranean. In short, whatever the historical literalness of Morianis, the dossier accurately maps the currents of knowledge that fed Arabic alchemy and that medieval readers believed Khalid embodied. The Morianis dialogue, later Liber de Composition Alchemy, is the earliest well-documented Arabic Latin alchemy translation and the chief literary source for the Khalid's teacher's storyline. It is precisely the text that made Khalid and Morianis household names among medieval and Renaissance alchemists. For the nature in a pregnant woman is one thing, and in Mercury, another. In 684 CE, the Umayyad elite gathered to resolve the leadership crisis. Khalid, though of the ruling house, was still a teenager, much younger than other contenders. The Syrian nobles opted to bypass him in favor of an older statesman, Marwan ibn al-Hakam, who hailed from a different branch of the Umayyad clan. Marwan was chosen as caliph on the condition that Khalid would be named heir after him. To seal this pact, Marwan married Khalid's mother, the young widow Fakida, strengthening the familial bond. For a moment it seemed Khalid's royal ambitions were merely deferred. He might ascend the throne after Marwan's reign. However, power struggle intervened. Once firmly in power, Marwan reneged on the deal. He removed Khalid from succession and designated his own sons as heirs instead. When Khalid reminds Marwan of the promise, the caliph reportedly publicly insulted Khalid's mother, Fakida. Enraged and dishonored, Fakida is said, in later legend, to have murdered Marwan in revenge by suffocating him with a pillow. While historians doubt this dramatic tale, it captures the intensity of betrayal Khalid experienced. In the span of a year, he went from the rightful heir of Muawiyah's lineage to a sidelined prince who had lost both his father and his promised throne. The Arabic chronicler al-Madiini summed up Khalid's plight with the remark that he was pursuing that which is impossible, that is alchemy. Many interpret this as a metaphor. Khalid's political ambitions, like the alchemist's dream of turning lead to gold, had proved futile. This quote, possibly misread by later writers, would ironically spark the legend of Khalid the Alchemist. More on that soon. Despite the setback, Khalid adopted fast. He forged a close friendship with Marwan's son, the new caliph, Abd al-Malik. Rather than rebelling, Khalid served loyally and was rewarded with influential roles. In 1691, during a decisive campaign to reunify the fractured caliphate, Abd appointed Khalid as a commander in the siege of Circassium against a rebel faction. He then led the left wing of the Umayyad army at the Battle of Maskin, which crushed the rival caliphate in Iraq. These victories restored Umayyad control over the eastern provinces. Khalid, still only in his early 20s, had proven his mettle on the battlefield and earned the trust of the caliph. As further affirmation, Abd married his own daughter, Aisha, to Khalid, making Khalid his son-in-law. By blood and loyalty, Khalid was now firmly integrated into the ruling family, even if he would never wear the caliph crown himself. After these eventful years, Khalid made a crucial choice. He withdrew from public life. Around 1692 or shortly thereafter, Khalid left the political and military arena and settled in Homs in central Syria. Abd al-Malik granted him the governorship of Homs as a kind of estate, and there Khalid lived out the rest of his life in relative seclusion. One might speculate on his motives. Perhaps the cutthroat nature of court politics and the trauma of his earlier disappointment left him disillusioned with power. By retiring to Homs, Khalid gained something he may have longed for: peace and time for intellectual pursuits. Later sources hint that in Homs he engaged in scholarly and artistic activities, such as writing poetry and studying hadith, which is prophetic traditions. We can picture him as a regional prince, patron, holding learned discussions in his villa, far from the intrigues of Damascus. This period of quiet retirement set the stage for Khalid's transformation into a legendary wise man. Freed from worldly ambition, he now turned his formidable mind toward the wisdom of the stars and the secrets of substance. The relative obscurity of his final decade allowed legends to grow. There is scant contemporary record of Khalid's specific activity in Homs, but within a century or two, stories began to circulate that this princely dropout had immersed himself in alchemy and occult sciences. As we shall see, what Khalid actually did in Homs is less documented than what later generations imagined he did, and those imaginations ran wild, casting Khalid as the seminal philosopher prince of the Islamic world. By the 9th century, Khalid ibn Yazid's name had become enshrined in Arabic lore as a master of alchemy and the occult. This is an interesting evolution. In his own time, Khalid was known as a poet, patron, and ex-prince, not necessarily an alchemist. So how did this legend take shape? A combination of later historical writings, synonymous texts, and oral tradition built the image of Khalid as the first Muslim alchemist. One early thread came from the historian al-Baladuri in 892, who, as noted, quoted his teacher al-Morianis' witty description that Khalid busied himself with alchemy in the figurative sense. It appears that al-Baladuri took it literally, or at least helped spread the anecdote that Khalid was pursuing that which is impossible, alchemy. Later writers seized on this as evidence that Khalid dabbled in the art. Soon, other prominent scholars repeated the association. The great Adib al-Jahiz praised Khalid's learning and explicitly wrote that he was the first in Islam who ordered the translation of works on astronomy, medicine, and alchemy. This claim, though historically dubious, was hugely influential. It portrayed Khalid as a pioneer of science, a royal patron who kick-started the translation of Greek knowledge into Arabic. In popular imagination, Khalid became the Arab Hermes, a conduit of ancient wisdom into the new Muslim empire. Another key figure, the bibliographer Abd al-Nadim, firmly cemented Khalid's alchemical reputation. In his famous catalog, Al-Farist, Ibn al-Nadim wrote, "The first Muslim alchemist was Khalid ibn Yazid, who is said to have studied alchemy under the Christian Morianis of Alexandria." This succinct statement packs in the core of the legend. Khalid as a disciple of the mysterious Christian sage, learning the secrets of alchemy. We'll examine that story momentarily. Ibn al-Nadim also listed several alchemical books attributed to Khalid, indicating that by 987 CE, a substantial corpus bore Khalid's name. Why Khalid specifically? Scholars have theorized on the legend's origins. One view, Manfred Ullman's, is that a simple misunderstanding gave birth to it. Al-Madaini's quip about Khalid pursuing the impossible was glossed by al-Baldahuri as a literal alchemy, thereby accidentally inaugurating the myth. Another view, Pierre Lorry's, suggests the texts attributed to Khalid were actually composed in humbler circles, perhaps by early occultists who lacked the noble patronage, and then ascribed to a prince to grant them prestige. By attaching their work to the famous Umayyad royal, these 8th and 9th century alchemists gave their writings an aura of antiquity and authority. In any case, from the 800s onward, Arabic writings frequently mention Khalid as an alchemist. Authors like Al-Jahiz, Al-Tabari, and Abu Faraj all name-dropped him as a pioneer in the occult arts. The legend had eclipsed reality. At the heart of Khalid's alchemical lore is the captivating tale of his mentorship under Morianis, often called Morianis in Arabic. This story is the closest thing we have to a personal anecdote about Khalid's mystical wanderings, and it reads almost like spiritual adventure literature. According to later accounts, Khalid, in his quest for the secrets of creation, learned of a Greek monk and hermit named Morianis, who dwelt in Palestine or Syria. Morianis was said to be a reclusive sage, an ancient adept and hermit of Jerusalem, rumored to possess the Philosopher's Stone and able to produce gold each year from base metals. Intrigued, Prince Khalid dispatched messengers and personally sought out this wise hermit. Eventually he found Morianis, living in the wilderness near Jerusalem. In a dramatic meeting, Khalid invited the elderly monk to his court. Morianis, clad in a coarse hair shirt and exuding an aura of wisdom, agreed to share his knowledge. It is said that Khalid visited Morianis daily, sitting at the feet of the hermit to discuss philosophy, history, and the hidden arts. Over time, Morianis initiated Khalid into the deepest secrets of alchemy, the knowledge of transmuting metals and achieving inner purification. This master-disciple relationship echoes the archetypal transfer of hermetic wisdom from the fading Byzantine world to the nascent Arabic world. One Arabic source even provides a chain of transmission. Jabir ibn Hayyan, the 8th century father of Islamic alchemy, mentions that he studied alchemy under a monk who was a pupil of Morianis, the tutor of Khalid ibn Yazid. In other words, Jabir claims his teacher's teacher was Khalid's teacher, forming a neat lineage of occult knowledge from Alexandria to the Umayyad court via Khalid, and then to the Abbasid era via Jabir. This lineage may not be historically true, but it was psychologically true for the medieval alchemists who craved continuity and antiquity. Through Khalid, they linked themselves to the ancient Hermetic tradition going back to Hermes Trismegistus. The tale of Khalid and Morianis was immortalized in a book that became extremely influential in both the Islamic and European alchemical corpus, Khalid's Questions to the Monk Morianis. In this dialogue, Khalid poses queries and Morianis reveals the answers, essentially laying out the steps to create the elixir or philosopher's stone. The text was translated into Latin in 1144 by Robert of Chester under the title Liber de Composition Alchemy, notable for being the first Arabic alchemical work ever rendered into Latin. In the preface, the translator explains the novelty of the science to the West. Since what alchemy is, and what its composition is, your Latin world does not yet know. I will explain it in the present book. The content that follows introduced European readers to the mystical dialogue of Khalid and Morianis, describing alchemical concepts in allegorical language. For example, Morianis tells Khalid that the thing, O king, is extracted from thee. With thee it is found, by thee it is received, hinting that the ingredients of the work come from the nature and the self, and that the king himself, Khalid, holds the key within. Such cryptic wisdom would fascinate alchemists for centuries. So powerful was the legend of Khalid's tutelage that his and Morianis' names became revered in the medieval alchemy. One historian writes that the names of Morianis and Khalid became well known to all alchemists in Europe. Their importance matched that of Al-Razi, Ibn Sina, and Jabir. In other words, European alchemical texts placed Khalid Rex, King Khalid, alongside luminaries like Razi's, Aventia, and Gerber. An engraving from the 17th century even depicts Morianis the Greek and King Khalid ibn Yazid sitting together, symbolizing the handoff of esoteric knowledge, an image often reproduced in alchemy compendiums of that era. With the legend firmly established, Khalid ibn Yazid's historical persona was transformed. To the later eyes, he was no longer primarily a failed claimant to the caliphate or a provincial governor. He was the wise prince who chose wisdom over worldly power. In a sense, Khalid became an occult role model, a man who turned his back on the throne to seek enlightenment in the hidden arts. This dramatic art, full of mystical allure, ensued that Khalid's name lived on far longer than many actual caliphs. Next, we will cover the writings attributed to him, the body of work that cements his status as an author of alchemical doctrine. Water is said to preserve the fetus in the womb for 3 months. Air warms it for 3 months. Fire guards it the same span. A large number of alchemical treatises, epistles, and poems are credited to Khalid in various manuscripts. Modern scholars generally view these texts as works written by unknown authors between the 8th and 10th century, but ascribe to Khalid to lend them authority. Nonetheless, they form a fascinating corpus reflecting early Islamic alchemical thought. Here I will touch on some of his major works. And first, we have the Registry of the Stars in the Paradise of Wisdom. And that is described as a collection of alchemical poems and treatises attributed to Khalid. These titles suggest a cosmic or philosophical framing of alchemical knowledge. In essence, it is an anthology of didactic poetry on alchemy, likely interspersed with short prose sections. One Arabic source explicitly calls this a diwan of poetry in alchemy, indicating that this work chiefly consists of verse odes expounding chemical lore. These poems probably employ rich symbolism of stars, minerals, and the wisdom paradise of alchemy's secrets. For example, one verse is ascribed to Khalid emphasizing keeping alchemical wisdom hidden. Truly, I conceal from people what I harbor of knowledge, for fear that a spiteful rival might enrich himself by it. This couplet reflects the esoteric ethos of the text. Alchemy's truths are veiled to prevent misuse by the unworthy. The Registry of the Stars is believed to have been compiled at a relatively late date, perhaps 13th to 15th century, by later alchemists drawing on earlier materials. It may incorporate poems circulating in alchemical circles and compile them under Khalid's name to create a prestigious legacy. The original language is Arabic and no medieval Latin version is recorded. While medieval bibliographers like Haji Khalifa mention the Registry of the Stars among Khalid's work, there is no evidence Khalid himself wrote this anthology. It is considered legendary attribution. And then we have the book of his testament to his son on the art. This work is known as Khalid's spiritual and practical advice to his son regarding the art of alchemy. It is essentially a testament or lengthy letter in which a father hands down alchemical doctrine to the next generation. This text is not widely published. Ibn al-Nadim, in his Firas, records having seen the book of the testament to his son on the art among 4 works of Khalid. This indicates writings existed by the 10th century. Its original language is Arabic and it was never translated into Latin, suggesting a primarily Middle Eastern circulation. Scholars unanimously regard the text as a later writer's creation. It may date from the 9th or 10th century when the legend of Khalid as an alchemist was flourishing. The didactic father-to-son genre was a known literary device often used to convey secret knowledge. Thus, a later alchemist likely adopted Khalid's persona to lend authority to his own teachings. Manfred Ullman and Sebastian Moreau note that such attributions reflect the image of Khalid as a sage carefully instructing his heir, which aligns with the narrative of him being noble-minded and deeply enamored of sciences. Unlike the more popular Khalid's Questions to the Monk Morianis, which we'll talk about next, the book of his testament to his son on the art is less widely attested. It was certainly extant in the medieval period, but many copies have been lost. Modern researchers have identified at least 1 manuscript. A copy of the writing was noted by Faux Sejin as an item, and a PDF of a manuscript was circulated in a private forum in 2018, implying it survives in a collection. The book of his testament to his son on the art has not yet seen a printed edition or translation, remaining accessible only through manuscript studies. Libraries in the Middle East could possibly hold unstudied copies under variant titles. Often works of this genre are simply titled Wasiya fi Alchemia in catalogs. And next we have Khalid's Questions to the Monk Morianis, also known as the Epistle of the Wise Monk Morianis to Prince Khalid. This is perhaps the most famous work attributed to Khalid. This is a dialogue between Prince Khalid and a Byzantine monk, Morianis, who instructs him in alchemy. In the Arabic, it is framed as an epistolary discourse, often titled Epistle of the Wise Monk Morianis to Khalid, consisting of questions by Khalid and answers by Morianis. The text opens with a narrative prologue. Khalid, eager to learn alchemy, hears of a Christian hermit in Jerusalem, Morianis, famed for his mastery of the art. Khalid sends for him. Morianis comes to Damascus to become his teacher. This dramatic encounter is vividly described. I dwell in Jerusalem, the man tells Khalid, and I know of a hermit called Morianis the monk who has achieved the art. He comes each year to Jerusalem, giving great sums to the poor. Khalid entreats Morianis for knowledge, and the core of the text ensues. Morianis reveals the secrets of the great work in a series of didactic exchanges. O Morianis, know that I have long sought the superior or great work, but found none to counsel me in this matter. Therefore, I earnestly request that you prepare me for some portion of your magistery. You shall have for me then whatever you may ask, and I will see to it that you return to your own land, God willing. The dialogue covers classical alchemical doctrine, the nature of the philosopher's stone, the unity of metals, the stages of transmutation, and allegorical descriptions of chemical operations. Morianis uses cryptic imagery, describing the one thing that conquers all, the marriage of sun and moon, gold and silver, and the generation of the elixir. For example, he explains that the stone is composed of a spirit and a body united, which must be repeatedly dissolved and coagulated. The Latin translation famously includes the line, Arabic Appalachia elixir, when introducing the philosopher's stone. This book is structured as questions by Khalid and answers by the monk, often in elaborate metaphor. At one point, Morianis declares, take one part of the sun and one of the moon. indicating gold and silver as ingredients, couched in hermetic symbolism. The dialogue emphasizes divine inspiration. Morianis attributes the power of transformation to God's will, aligning the mystical aspect of alchemy with its practical instructions. By the end, Khalid is said to have grasped the divine secrets of the magisterium, having received Morianis' testament of wisdom. Though set in the late 7th century, the text itself was written much later. Scholarly consensus place it in the early to mid 10th century. Pierre Lorry even proposed an 8th century origin for some parts, but more recent analysis by Marianne Dapsons suggests a 10th century compilation. The author is unknown, possibly an Arabic-speaking Christian or Sabian alchemist familiar with Hermetic dialogues. The work shows syncretism of Greek, Alexandrian, and early Islamic alchemical ideas consistent with the atmosphere of Baghdad or Syria in the 9th to 10th centuries. It purports to preserve a legendary moment, the transmission of Byzantine alchemy to the Arab world. In reality, this legend likely evolved over time. By the 9th century, writers like al-Baladuri had mentioned Khalid's interest in alchemy, and by the 10th, the full story of Khalid and Morianis was entrenched. This text may well be the literary crystallization of that legend, a dramatic teaching dialogue created to embody the fabled initiation of Islam's first alchemist. This Arabic dialogue holds a special place in history as the first Arabic alchemical treatise translated into Latin. On February 11th, 1144, Robert of Chester completed his Latin version, titled Liber de Composition Alchemy. Robert's preface recounts how he obtained the Arabic text in Spain and rendered it for the West. The Latin closely mirrors the dialogue form. Morianis instructs Khalid. The content is nearly identical. For instance, Morianis in Latin describes the stone's 4 qualities, hot, cold, dry, or moist, and how the hidden becomes manifest through the alchemical process. One passage reads, "This is the book of the 3 words. In it there is heat, dryness, cold, and moisture. One power lies hidden, and another is manifest. Then this spirit is transformed into the most noble body and does not flee the fire, but flows like oil, a living tincture, most perpetual, and yet it is the precious sun." Robert of Chester's translation had enormous influence in Europe. It introduced Latin readers to the concept of alchemy as a wisdom inherited from antiquity. The Testament of Morianis was widely copied, printed, and translated into vernacular languages in the early modern period. For example, it appeared in French and English alchemical compendia of the 16th and 17th century. Western alchemists, from Roger Bacon to Isaac Newton, were aware of Morianis. It imparted key Hermetic concepts, the unity of matter, the cyclic distillation, into Latin alchemical discourse. Its very framed story, an adept monk transmitting secrets to an Arab prince, resonated as a legitimizing myth for alchemy's divine pedigree. On the Arabic side, this writing survives in multiple manuscripts, notably one in Istanbul, Faith MS 3227, and Istanbul, Sahid Ali Pasha MS 1749, contain the complete Arabic dialogue. Fragments are preserved in the writings of later alchemists in the 13th and 14th century that both cite Marianis' teaching. The National Library of Medicine holds an Arabic copy in NLMMS A70, item 19. Other known manuscripts were in Cairo and Hyderabad, as noted by Paul Krauss. The Khalid Morianis dialogue has been studied extensively as a cornerstone of early Islamic alchemy. Julius Ruska analyzed the legend and even doubted the historicity of Morianis. Ruska initially suggested the Latin text might have been composed by a later, possibly Latin author, though subsequent research upheld the Arabic origin. Manfred Ullman's article critically examined how the Khalid Morianis story evolved, concluding that the alchemy legend was grafted onto Khalid's biography by later mythmakers. Marian's recent doctoral thesis, 2021, provides the most comprehensive study comparing the Arabic and the 2 Latin versions in detail. She investigates the text sources and its doctrine, which includes an explicit description of the elixir and the metallic transmutation process. Dapsons confirms that the Latin translation of 1144 is faithful and that it truly stands as the earliest full alchemical treatise in Latin. The impact of this text is twofold. In the Islamic world, it set a template for alchemical teacher-student dialogues. It may have inspired parts of the Jabirian corpus, which often used dialogues and letters to impart wisdom. In Europe, the Testament of Morianis was seminal. Along with translations of Avicenna and Gerber, it helped ignite the 12th century Latin alchemical tradition. Roger Bacon in the 13th century echoes some of Morianis' teaching and even names Morianis as an adept. Later, the text's popularity is evident. It appears in the famous Theatrum Chemicum of 1622 and was translated into English by 15th century practitioners. The Liber de composition also introduced the very word alchemy to the West as coming from Arabic knowledge. In sum, this writing served as a bridge. It transmitted the Hermetic Gnostic alchemy of late antiquity into both the Islamic Golden Age and via Latin translation into medieval Europe scientific canon. And here are a few excerpts. And this is said by Khalid. How can it be that the major work should have but one root and one substance? And Morianis responds, its names may vary, yet I say it is but one. On this point, I will cite the authorities to you. And here's another excerpt. O old man, wisest of men, know that I have long sought for many the magistery of Hermes, but could never find any who would open the true matter to me. And we have another one. What words are these that you use? Are you ignorant how many men have been deprived of their lives by me for such speeches? If your words are true, I will enrich you, but if false, expect extreme torments. And finally, one power lies hidden and another manifest. Then the spirit is transformed into the most noble body, and it does not flee fire but flows like oil, a living tincture. And next we have Liber Secretorum Alchemy, the Book of the Secrets of Alchemy. Liber Secretorum Alchemy is a Latin treatise attributed to Khalid, son of Yazid. The Liber Secretorum is a practical handbook of alchemical recipes and secrets. It purports to reveal secret formulas for transmutation, essentially a collection of alchemical instructions or aphorisms. This text is concise and recipe-like. For instance, one surviving reference indicates it contained an age-old formula for aurum portabile, or drinkable gold, instructing how to dissolve gold leaf in a mixture of wine and distilled vinegar to extract a medical elixir. The work likely enumerates the arcana of the art, preparation of the philosopher's mercury, various color stage indicators, and the secret properties of materials. In structure, it may open with a brief theoretical preface and then list a series of secrets, like methods to produce tinctures or accelerate maturation of metals. It is not framed as a dialogue, rather it reads as a manual or notebook of alchemical processes. Given its attribution to Khalid, it might also contain occasional references to wisdom of ancient authorities, but primarily it promises practical knowledge, the secrets kept hidden by the sages. Modern scholars believe that this book is based on an Arabic original, now lost, that likely dates to no earlier than the 11th century. The Latin text, as we have it, was probably translated in the 12th or 13th century, during the period of intense Arabic to Latin scientific translation. However, intriguingly, the Latin work does not correspond neatly to any extant Arabic treatise attributed to Khalid. It might derive from an Arabic compendium of alchemical secrets that circulated under Khalid's name in the High Middle Ages but later disappeared. According to the historian J. Hello, the Liber Secretorum shows linguistic cues of translation and is classed as a translation from Arabic. Its Arabic source could have been a short treatise or a section of a larger pseudo-Khalid alchemical corpus. The Latin translator is unknown. It was not Robert of Chester. Some have speculated it might have been translated in Spain or southern Italy, given the interest in alchemy there. Because it's simpler and more recipe-like than the theoretical Morianis dialogue, the Liber Secretorium may reflect a later stratum of practical alchemy, possibly influenced by the growing Jabarian recipes circulating or Latin Gerber works of the 13th century. In any event, by the time it appears in Latin, it was accepted as one of Khaled's authentic works, even though we now consider that attribution as bogus. The Latin Liber Secretorium Alchemy did not achieve the same wide manuscript diffusion as the Testament of Morianis. Scholars note that it was poorly circulated in the Latin West. Only a few manuscript copies are recorded. For example, a Middle English alchemical compilation mentions Liber Secretorium Alchemy of Khaled as one source, suggesting it was known to some 15th century English alchemists, perhaps in Latin or translated. A notable milestone is its inclusion in the 1545 printed compendium Alchemy Gebri. This printed edition made that text available to early modern scholars. The 1545 print and subsequent reprints are our main sources today. Manuscript-wise, the University of Glasgow and the British Library catalogues show entries for Liber Secretorium Alchemy under pseudo-Khaled, indicating at least a couple of late medieval copies existed. For instance, an inventory of St. Leonard's College in St. Andrews lists Liber Secretorium Alchemy in a collection along with Speculum Alchemy. Manuscripts like Mellon MS-33 at Yale also contain an English translation of it from the 16th century. Overall, why not plentiful, the presence of the text in a few key collections suggests it was read by practicing alchemists, albeit to a lesser extent than more famous works. Hilot's Lay's text makes an important observation. Liber Secretorium presupposes some Arabic source and can be understood only in that transmission context. Recent research by Marie-Lou von Franz and others in examining Latin alchemical codices have described Liber Secretorium as a straightforward treatise of chirochemical secrets, essentially bridging alchemy and early chemistry. The structure and language are less allegorical and more procedural. This has led some historians to compare it to later pseudo-Gerber works or the short experimenta found in medieval Latin collections. Dapsons and Moreau, in a 2021 article on Alchemy Transmission, note that unlike the Morianis text, which has clear Arabic parallels, Liber Secretorium's Arabic archetype is not directly known, hinting it might have been an Arabic epistle of practical tips that simply did not survive or remains unidentified. They also point out that the Latin Liber Secretorium did not become as foundational in university circles. It was more of a niche text for dedicated alchemists. Its contents is nonetheless valuable to historians because it represents the kind of recipe knowledge that was being transmitted alongside theoretical texts. In sum, academically, the Liber Secretorium is seen as evidence of how early Islamic alchemical know-how, especially technical processes and medicinal alchemy, trickled into Europe in a compact form. Within the Latin tradition, the Liber Secretorium Alchemy had a modest but real influence. It contributed to the growing body of secrets literature. Books of secrets were very popular in the late Middle Ages. It may have informed works like Roger Bacon's Radix Mundi or the anonymous Liber Trace Gradium, which also compiled practical alchemical operations. For instance, the mineralogical record notes that the 17th century collections list Liber Secretorium Alchemy alongside the Tabula Smaragdina and other staples, implying that those who studied Hermes, Gerber, and Lull also paid some attention to Khaled's secrets. In the Arabic world, if the original was circulating, it likely reinforced Khaled's legend as well. However, since this work is known only through its Latin, its primary influence was on European practitioners who mined it for recipes such as the preparation of potable gold or the creation of philosophical mercury. Unlike the Morianis dialogue, Liber Secretorium doesn't have to have spawned commentary or wide discussion. It was taken at face value as a cookbook of alchemy. By the 16th century, with its printing, it became one piece of the vast puzzle of alchemical literature available to experimenters like Paracelsus or John Dee. In short, Liber Secretorium Alchemy didn't revolutionize alchemical theory, but it quietly disseminated practical techniques and secret formulas. extending the Khalidian legacy into the hands-on workshops of medieval and Renaissance alchemists. Now we will move on to Liber Trium Verborum. Liber Trium Verborum, attributed to Khalid, is an alchemical treatise that revolves around 3 enigmatic words or principles central to the art. The text is written in Latin, likely translated from an Arabic original now lost or unidentified. It is composed in a highly allegorical and didactic style, divided into multiple short chapters or sections that systematically unveil the meaning of the 3 words. The treatise essentially expounds the entire alchemical work, often personified as the Philosopher's Stone, through a triadic formula. These 3 words are not explicitly listed at the outset, but as the text unfolds, it becomes clear they refer to the 3 fundamental concepts or stages. Many scholars interpret them as symbolic code, perhaps for the body, soul, spirit, or for the 3 phases of the magnum opus. For example, the text explains from 3, 2 are understood, and from 2, 5, but 3 are not understood. A riddle indicating numeric relationship in the process, which likely conceal the proportions or steps of the work. Liber Trium Verborum employs natural philosophical analogies. A notable part of the text compares the alchemical work to the development of a fetus in the womb, governed by the 7 planets. It describes month by month how Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, and so on act on the embryo, an allegory mapping onto the stages of transmutation. For instance, in the 4th month, the sun as Lord breathes in the spirit and life begins. In the 7th month, the moon labors to expel the fetus. This elaborate metaphor illustrates the gradual perfection of the philosophical child, equating the stone's gestation with a human birth. The 3 words themselves are hinted to be hidden and revealed, not given to the impious but to the faithful, indicating they encapsulate the secret of the stone's composition in a veiled way. The treatise emphasizes polarity and unity. It speaks of making the hidden manifest and the manifest hidden, of converting spirit into body and body into spirit, classical alchemical tenets of solve e coagula. The final chapters discuss astronomical timing, observing the planets and the work, and enumerate specific cycles, like the circle of the sun of 28 years, the leap of the moon, and so on, blending astrology with alchemical timing. The treatise ends on a triumphant note that once these degrees are fulfilled, alchemy is born by art, but more truly born naturally according to the order of the planets as God showed the first man. In essence, Liber Trium Verborum is a meticulous allegorical exposition of the magnum opus, structured around a triple formula that encapsulates the whole process from start to finish. The work was likely composed in Arabic originally, though no Arabic title by that name is known. Its content suggests an Islamic alchemical origin, 9th to 10th century, with later Latin translation, perhaps 12th to 13th century. Notably, the text cites the Persian philosophers and uses ideas of Perso-Arabic alchemy. The reference to Persian philosophers aligns with the Islamic world context, pointing to an author drawing on Eastern sources. The presence of detailed planetary embryology, found also in Islamic alchemical works, further supports an Arabic origin. Scholars like Ruska observed that the Liber Trium Verborum shares content with pseudo-Razi alchemical texts. In fact, Ruska, in 1924, described Liber Trium Verborum in detail, indicating it might have been incorrectly attributed to al-Razi in some manuscripts before being recognized as Khalid's work. This suggests that in medieval Arabic tradition, the text's true authorship was murky, possibly attributed to various sages until the Latin translators fixed it under Khalid's name. The Latin translation is anonymous. It likely occurred alongside the wave of alchemical translations in Spain or Italy. Thorndike and Kebre's Catalog of Incipits, item 76, identifies Liber Trium Verborum, confirming its circulation in medieval libraries. The Latin style is didactic, with frequent use of imperative and explanatory prose, indicating a competent translation retaining technical terms. Halou classifies it as translation from Arabic, and its Latin incipit matches no known independent Latin treatise, reinforcing that it was rendered from an earlier source. Liber Trium Verborum enjoyed moderate popularity in Europe's alchemical circles. Manuscripts are found in several collections. For example, Yale's Beinecke Library, Mellon MS 27, early 15th century, contains Liber Trium Verborum. The text was also incorporated into a famous compendia. It appears in Zetzner's Theatrum Chemicum, 1613 edition, under Khalid. An English translation existed by the 16th century. Elias Ashmole's Alchemy Manuscripts lists a book of the 3 words of King Khalid, which was translated into English. The internet and modern esoteric publishers have circulated this translation. In 1941, Eugene Cancelet, a student of Fulcanelli, included Liber Trium Verborum excerpts in French in Alchemy Explicée, showing its appeal to 20th century alchemists. However, unlike the Morianis text, Liber Trium Verborum was not one of the early 12th century translations highlighted by historians, so it remained somewhat in the shadows academically. Only in recent scholarship, through cross-analysis of Latin and Arabic works, has Liber Trium Verborum been given attention. Notably, its description by Ruska in 1924 remains a standard reference. No standalone critical edition exists yet. Researchers rely on comparing multiple manuscript witnesses. Fortunately, the text's consistency across copies, as evidenced by identical incipits and chapter structures in different manuscripts, suggests a stable transmission. Scholars view Liber Trium Verborum as important to medieval alchemical teaching. Its use of a numerical riddle, the 3 words, in the extended embryological metaphor signal an intent to encode alchemical operations and learned allegory. This aligns with the layers of secrecy approach, delivering truth in obscure terms accessible only to the initiated. The planetary embryo allegory specifically has drawn commentary. It mirrors ideas in the writings of Pseudo-Khalid and Yabir that the alchemist is imitating nature's generative processes. The 3 words themselves have been given the subject of debate. Some propose that they might be salt, sulfur, mercury, 3 principles, though the text doesn't name them explicitly. Others think they refer to 3 crucial instructions or phrases hidden within the work. For instance, the treatise stresses doing A, B, C in a particular order. Those might be the actual 3 words. Von Franz and Jungian scholars found psychological symbolism in the trinity of words, linking it to trios in alchemical symbolism. And lastly, Liber Trium Verborum reveals a blend of alchemy and astrology characteristic of 14th to 15th century alchemy, even though its roots are older. Its emphasis on time periods, 28-year cycles and so on, suggests it was used to integrate astrological timing into practical lab work. And lastly, we have Epistola. Medieval sources preserve an untitled Arabic letter treatise attributed to Khalid, whose Latin counterpart circulates simply as Epistola, a letter, with the translator unknown. The best modern study is Marion Dapson's and Sebastian Moreau, The 4 Signs of the Art, which edits the Arabic, gives an English translation, and identifies the Latin version. They show the work is very well attested, about 12 Arabic manuscripts and 6 Latin witnesses, and that the Latin closely tracks the Arabic, though both traditions have minor divergences. A distinct feature of these treatises is that it organizes practical doctrine around the 4 signs of the art, diagnostic markers by which the operator knows the matter has entered the right states. Dapsons and Moreau introduce and translate these passages. They are one of the core teaching blocks of the text. The Prome is classic alchemical ethics of secrecy. The author says that he has watched people seek the craft of wisdom in every age, while the ancient sages detested broadcasting it and preserved it from the ignorant. 2 authentic Arabic lines from the QDL manuscript are, "And now I have seen that people have sought the craft of wisdom in every age. For if they did not keep it hidden, it would pass into base hands in vile conditions. The ethical frame immediately sets up the treatise as a didactic letter to a worthy reader. The art can be written down, but only veiled and only for those with patience and discipline. While individual manuscripts vary slightly, the main blocks are stable, as synthesized from Dabson's and Moreau's study and the Arabic witnesses, and they are 1. Prom, why write and why veil? The author justifies committing secrets to writing to protect the worthy and spare them from waste, yet warns against publication to the unfit. 2. The matter and first principles. The doctrine insists on unity, the one thing with many names, and on the rule, like acts on like, a signature Khalidian maxim that reoccurs across the corpus. The closing line in the same QDL sums it up. For nature cleaves to nature, and nature prevails over nature. And number 3, operations in outline. The Epistola gives layers of operations. Solvay and coagula cycles, repeated nourishings, gentle heating, rest periods, expressed less in recipes than in sign-based instructions, like when you see X, proceed to Y. Dabson's and Moreau emphasize how the text teaches through signs rather than measurements. And number 4, the 4 signs of the art. The heart of the treatise, a set of 4 diagnostic signs the artist must watch for, described with sensory cues, appearance, behavior under heat, and so on. These benchmark states indicate when to raise, maintain, or slacken the fire and when to move to the next operation. Number 5, cautions and tests. The letter warns about false colors and premature fixation and closes with practical tests that confirm completion, again phrased as signs. If it behaves, thus proceed. If not, continue cooking. Mirroring how sign-based instructions replaces explicit weights and times. And finally, number 6, closing exhortation. Return to secrecy, humility, and gratitude to God for the gift. Another hallmark of early Arabic alchemical prose. Now we will get into these in a little more detail. It opens in a quiet, cautionary key. The writer, speaking in the royal persona of Khalid, looks out at generation of seekers who chase the craft of wisdom and reminds you why the sages veiled their art. People have always looked for this craft, he says. The ancients hid it, not out of miserliness, but to keep it from the unfit. The Epistola is not a recipe book. It reads like a master's long letter to a single student. Ethics first, then doctrine, then the bench. Its doctrine is the oldest alchemical confidence. One thing, many names. Learned not by memorizing weights, but by recognizing signs. Throughout, the author's method is diagnostic. Watch how the matter behaves, change heat by degrees, do not hurry, prove what you think you've made. The body of the letter moves through 3 arcs. First, it establishes the one root, a single substance that hides contrary qualities, heat, dryness inside, cold and moisture outside, and must be educated by fire until the hidden appears and the manifest is cured. Second, it teaches the work as mutual conversion, spirit into body, body into spirit, until stability is reached. Third, it ends with the proofs of a true tincture. Right adhesion, no smoke, no flight from fire. The final page stitches the doctrine into a maxim you hear again across the Khalidian dossier. For nature cleaves to nature, and nature prevails over nature. The letter's first doctrine looks simple but governs everything that follows. The subject is one, the signs are plural. Alchemical vocabulary proliferates: water, vinegar, spirit, oil, sulfur, but these are masks for behaviors. Don't be trapped by names. The writer says, watch how your matter answers heat, how it takes color, how it returns from vapor to body. If you know the Morianis dialogue, you'll hear the same music. One root, one substance, even under many appellations. Midway, the letter states its center plainly. The work succeeds when the spirit becomes body and body becomes spirit, repeated until the union no longer breaks under trial heat. This is the moral of all the parables. From womb and birth in the Latin Liber Triumvirorum to sun and moon in Morianis. But here it's taught as lab behavior. No fleeing, no smoke, oily flow, quiet fixation. Then we have the 4 signs of the art, condensed from Daspin's and Moreau's edition. Sign 1, right disillusion. The matter softens and wets under gentle heat. Aqueous smoke that burns or blackens is a false path. Even compliant solution is the real entrance. Keep the fire small, watch the answer. Sign 2, the subtle breath and the gross part. A thin, penetrative spirit rises while the heavy, feculent part settles. You nurse the fire until the light returns and joins the heavy, without stench or soot. Sign 3, fixation, no flight from fire. You have begun to fix the volatile when the mass does not flee the fire, gives no watery fume, and flows obediently. This letter hinges of spirit and body conversions until consistency appears. Sign 4, tincting power, the proof. The work grips clean metal at heat like wax, does not smoke, does not blanch, and repeats its tincture on trial. Only then increase by rule and finish. Finally, the last pages are all discernment. A false red will smoke, leap away, or blanch. A true tincture adheres to glowing metal like wax, remains in the fire without flight, and tinks again on repetition. Only then and only by rule, not in patience, do you raise the heat to finish. Those same trial proofs are what the Latin 3 words will later ritualize as degrees and tests. The family resemblance is no accident. Before we wrap this letter up, think of the Epistola as the hands-on conscience of the Khalid corpus. The Morianis dialogue gives the romance and the one-root philosophy that Latin alchemy fell in love with. The Liber Trium Verborum compresses the regimen into degrees and tests. The Epistola is the quiet hinge, signs you can actually watch, told in the spare moral voice of an early Arabic master. Its manuscript footprint shows it was popular in Arabic and also circulated in Latin. Dapsons and Moreau identify a matching Latin epistola that tracks the Arabic closely. A century ago, this writing sat in catalogs without much comment. Today we can place it precisely. Marian Dapsons and Sebastian Moreau edited the Arabic text and translated it in a major 2021 study, showing that this letter is one of the most copied Khalidian items and that it pivots on the 4 signs of the art. Now, it's also important to note that none of these texts are definitely by Khalid's own hand. They were probably composed by early alchemists who used Khalid as a pseudonym, a practice not uncommon. And as the Alchemy Web Museum quips, this use of pseudonymous authorship is a common feature of medieval alchemical literature. Nonetheless, to medieval readers, these were Khalid's teachings, and that is how he influenced posterity. In summary, the writings attributed to Khalid portray a complete alchemical curriculum. Theoretical foundations, practical instructions, spiritual guidance, dialogues or initiation, and even poetic allegories. Whether or not Khalid truly authored any of these, their existence solidified his name as the fountainhead of Islamic alchemy. As one modern scholar put it, Khalid occupies a high standing among Arabic alchemists, and most Arabic works on alchemy give citations from his writings and poems on the art. His legendary status was such that doubting it came to be seen as almost heretical among later occultists. Only in modern times have researchers untangled the myth, understanding Khalid's role in alchemy's history as likely symbolic, but nonetheless profoundly influential. The liquid makes a globe and receives flesh, blood, and members. Khalid's story is as much about the realm of ideas in the 7th to 8th centuries as it is about one man. To truly grasp why he is revered in occult lore, we must appreciate the mystical and scientific worldview of his time, especially as it relates to alchemy, astronomy, and cosmology. In Khalid's era, the boundaries between science, magic, and spirituality were thin. Alchemy was not mere silliness. It was a philosophically rich discipline that encompassed chemistry, metallurgy, medicine, astrology, and spiritual transformation. The prevailing cosmology was inherited from late antiquity a blend of Hermetic, Neoplatonic, and Aristotelian ideas. The universe was seen as a grand chain of correspondences. The 7 planets influenced the 7 metals, the 4 elements combined in various proportions to create all matter. Everything had an outer, exoteric form and an inner, esoteric spirit. This way of thinking naturally lent itself to mystical interpretation. Within this framework, alchemy was often called the divine art or the sacred art, as we see in Khaled's attributed titles. It wasn't just about making gold, it was about perfecting nature, imitating the creator's work on a small scale. Many alchemists were devout, seeing their work as uncovering the laws set by God. In later Islamic thought, alchemy sometimes took on allegorical meaning for spiritual purification, the idea that one can transmutate the lead of the soul into the gold of enlightenment. While Khaled himself predates formal Sufi mysticism, it's telling that Jabir, one of his intellectual descendants, was called al-Sufi, and that some Sufi alchemists emerged not long after, blending esoteric Islam with alchemical symbolism. Khaled's legendary pursuits fit perfectly into the occult spiritual paradigm. He was credited with translating books on astronomy and medicine as well as alchemy. Astronomy at that time was deeply entangled with astrology. Understanding the stars meant understanding fate and cosmic influences. If indeed Khaled sponsored, or was believed to sponsor, the translation of the Book of the Stars, he would have been bringing in texts like Ptolemy's works or Hermes' astrological lore. The title, Diwan of the Stars, attributed to him, resonates with astrology, implying a record or compilation of star knowledge. Alchemy itself was often considered astrology of the earth, with metals growing in the womb of the earth under stellar guidance. One old belief held that each metal matures underground over long eras, influenced by the motions of the heavens, gold being the perfectly matured metal. The Paradise of Wisdom in Khaled's Diwan might have included cosmological sections describing the structure of the heavens and the climates, as suggested by how later alchemist al-Iraqi included Ptolemaic 7 climes in his own work. We should also consider mysticism and occultism more broadly in the Umayyad context. Islam in Khaled's day was still developing its intellectual contours. There wasn't an established occult tradition in Islam yet, but there were certainly exoteric versus esoteric tensions. Some strict religious scholars frowned on alchemy and astrology as dubious or impious. There was a sense that alchemy was a repository for those seeking deeper truths beyond the literal religious law, a form of occult knowledge pursued by an intellectual elite. Khaled's legend slots neatly into this narrative, a prince of the ruling Sunni dynasty who steps into the shadows to seek hidden wisdom. It gives a romantic, rebel quality to his character, the one who wasn't content with orthodox knowledge alone. Finally, when we speak of contemporary beliefs in mathematics, it's worth noting Khaled was also linked to early alchemy inventions. Some later sources mused that Khaled's pursuit of alchemy led to actual technical discoveries. For example, Jabir credits his monk teacher, Morianis, with teaching him how to create certain acid and chemical compounds. It's not impossible that the real Khaled, if he dabbled in chemistry, experimented with dyes or metallurgy. Syria had industries of glassmaking and metalwork which required chemical know-how. One modern article claims, without solid proof, that Khaled, who died at a very young age at 704 AD, was the first Islamic scientist who opened doors to the knowledge of wisdom, discovery, and invention. This may be hyperbole, but it reflects a view that Khaled started a scientific impulse in Islam. His curiosity, as imagined, spans from mathematics to astronomy to medicine. In legend, he even authored a medical text or two, but those are lost. What did the world look like through Khaled's eyes? Perhaps a world alive with occult forces, metals growing like plants in the dark earth, stars singing in the sky imparting secrets below, numbers and proportions governing the harmony of creation. Some of Khaled's work that cite him use Egyptian hieroglyph-inspired symbols like eagles, serpents, black suns to encode alchemical operations. This shows that by the 13th century, Khaled's legacy was woven into a rich tapestry of occult symbolism. In one illustration in the Book of Seven Climes, we see figures like a raven, symbolizing the black phase negrito, an eagle, the volatile spirit, and a distillation furnace drawn with mystical emblems. Khaled's name in such manuscripts is evoked as an authority who understood these symbols. In summary, Khaled's association with mysticism, occultism, cosmology, and mathematics is mostly through the lens of alchemy as the universal science. He symbolizes the moment when the Islamic world took up the mantle of ancient occult knowledge. Whether in factual deeds or in mythical attributions, Khaled stands at the crossroads of religion and science, a devout Muslim prince intrigued by the workings of God's universe at its most arcane levels. This dual identity, both pious and occult, made him a uniquely inspiring figure for generations to come, from medieval scholars writing alchemical allegories to modern authors and even podcasters fascinated by the hidden side of history. The secret of the secrets of God. Though Khaled's historical footprint was relatively modest, he never ruled as caliph and he died young. His legendary legacy has proven enduring. Let's examine how he influenced the world, especially in the realms of science, spirituality, and culture, and why his story still captivates us today. His direct influence can be traced in the chain of alchemists after him. Jabir ibn Hayyan Gerber, the most famous Islamic alchemist, consistently linked his knowledge back to Khalid through Morianis. Jabir's writing, the Jabirian corpus, often mentioned the books of Prince Khalid as sources. For example, Jabir's Book of 70 lists Khalid among authorities and quotes him on chemical operations. This means that the technical content of those pseudonymous Khalid texts did feed into subsequent research. Concepts like using mercuric and sulfurous compounds, apparatuses like the bain-marie, named after Mary the Jewess, but presumably passed down via Morianis to Khalid, and various recipes all traveled through the literature with Khalid's name attached. In a way, Khalid became a symbolic author whose name guaranteed a text value. In the same way Hermetic texts were ascribed to Hermes and Neoplatonic ones to Plato, alchemical texts had Khalid. One specific legacy is the Liber de Composition Alchemy in Latin Europe. Translated in the 12th century, it spread Khalid's fame to Western alchemists. Its translator, Robert of Chester, was in awe that the book joins the most precious substances, naturally transforming them into better substances. That book was read by figures like Albertus Magnus, Roger Bacon, and countless anonymous adepts. In fact, it was printed multiple times during the Renaissance and translated further into French, German, and English. This means Khalid entered the canon of Western alchemy under the Latinized name Khalid, C-A-L-I-D. For instance, the 1617 alchemical compendium by Michael Meyer includes Khalid, C-A-L-I-D, in the imaged gathering of sages at the table of Hermes. Hence, Khalid indirectly influenced European science. By inspiring Latin alchemists, he played a part, through texts, in the long development that would one day lead to chemistry. Khalid's story also carries a spiritual moral that resonated with mystics. He exemplified renunciation of power for the sake of knowledge. In Islamic culture, renouncing the worldly life for knowledge is respected, and here he was a prince who did exactly that. Some Sufi writers later cited Khalid as an example of one who turned inward. The notion that he studied with a Christian hermit also served as an interfaith spiritual theme. Wisdom is universal, and a Muslim prince can learn from a Christian monk in harmony. This is somewhat echoed in later Islamic esoteric movements that integrated ideas from various sources, Neoplatonism, Hermeticism, and so on. It's clear that Khalid's real legacy is less about what he tangibly achieved and more about what he came to represent. He symbolizes the thirst for knowledge that transcends borders and creeds, a true seeker. That, perhaps more than any gold made in a crucible, is his richest contribution to history. Khaled deserves a spotlight on the Occult Rejects because his story encapsulates what it means to seek truth on the margins of the orthodox. He was, in essence, an occultist in the court. His peers chased power and conquest. Khaled sought the philosopher's stone, both literally in laboratories and metaphorically in enlightenment. In a world that might have dismissed alchemy as fool's gold, Khaled embraced it, thereby legitimizing an entire tradition. He represents those historical figures whose contributions were undervalued by mainstream chronicles but kept alive in esoteric circles. Just as the Occult Rejects aims to shine a light on hidden truths and forgotten pioneers, Khaled's tale brings forth the message that wisdom can flourish even when rejected by the halls of power. In closing, this episode on Khaled will not only recount facts and legends, but also evoke a heartfelt reflection on the pursuit of wisdom against the odds. Even though the story may not be completely true, Khaled's life teaches us about resilience, how a young man turned personal defeat into a victory for human knowledge. It teaches us about open-mindedness, how a Muslim prince learned from a Christian monk in a time of religious conflict, a beautiful reminder of unity beyond dogma. And it teaches the value of curiosity and courage. Khaled had the courage to pursue the impossible, and in doing so, he expanded the realm of the possible for generations to come. His story resonates today as we continue to explore the boundaries of science and spirituality, often facing skepticism. Khaled's spirit encouraged us to remain seekers, to look up at the stars with wonder and down into the crucible with hope, knowing that the quest itself can transmute our lives into something golden.